and welcome to another segment of Life Changing Solutions. I'm Angie Torres, and today I have a very special guest, Dr. Laura. She is a therapist, but we will get to that in a second because the topic of today is we're going to be talking about blame, shame, and guilt. You know, a lot of that happens in life. As I've spoken into like the personal development end, there's a lot of different facets in personal development. But something that I've noticed that is threaded through in almost every one of those facets is there's this blame, shame, and guilt game going on, whether because your mom told you you should act and be some way, and now you're going against that, so now you feel bad, and there's this whole cycle of beat up, because society says you know, again, should act or be or behave or do. And again, you just don't feel that way. So it just creates this cycle. Mm-hmm. And then, well, sex is definitely no different. And it's definitely a part of life. And so that's why I've invited Dr. Laura here to talk about it, about that. But first, what do you do? What are you about, Dr.
Great,
Laura?
and thank you so much for having me here today, Angie. I appreciate it so much. I am a licensed clinical professional counselor, which is a fancy way of saying therapist. I'm also a clinical sexologist, which is a person who studies and interacts around areas of sexuality, human sexuality. And mostly what I do is I'm a therapist in two distinct communities. One of them is in assault survival, so people who've gone through sexual assault. And then in my private practice, I work with folks on a variety of sexuality-related issues, such as infidelity or opening up a marriage or relationship, someone being trans or gay and kind of navigating that with a partner or a family, and a variety of other things. And, I mean, sex in and of itself is pretty taboo, mm-hmm. and from a societal or even culturally speaking, I know as a Hispanic, sex and sexuality, that is just something that you don't speak of. But I know that that belief expands beyond Hispanics. It's absolutely
just such a big taboo. So it's just like I have so many questions. You know, and I mentioned the whole shame, game, and guilt, mm-hmm. and I would imagine that because of the taboo, mm-hmm. it creates a lot of shame.
It does, and I think it also contributes to people not realizing and experiencing their greatest sexual potential. It's very limiting, and it can be very self-destructive, but it can also be destructive in the greater sense in terms of families. When you are dealing with someone living with an awful lot of shame, there are going to be different outlets where they try to get their needs met and not have to face the shame that's being put on them by either society or a family member or a partner. That can lead to infidelity, that can lead to lying, that can lead to destructive behavior, dangerous behavior, risk-taking behavior, because they can't be out about what they really want to do or who they really are.
And so, you know, again, we have those societal norms. Mm-hmm. Are you saying they don't matter?
They do matter. I just wonder, when we go from societal norm to self-imposed rules, that's a pretty big leap. And I think societal norms, if we look at it from an external point of view, what are the rules that we all can agree on to operate in terms of sexuality? I would say don't hurt others. We have that whole don't have sex with a kid if you're an adult. I think we can all agree on that one. And make sure that you're getting consent.
Okay.
I would say those are the societal norms that are safe to stick to, and that we all have 99% of us have a shared understanding and agreement toward. If we just lived by that, we'd be free and clear. I think what ends up happening is we end up having these other self-inflicted, familial-inflicted, culturally inflicted, media-inflicted, other kinds of rules that nobody ever hands you this rule book, but you create it in your own mind. And then you start living by it. And then your behavior changes, or your behavior ceases, or you don't get to explore. And then that's when bad things happen.
Okay, and so something that I heard you speak into is like the sexuality, and that also creates a lot of shame. Mm-hmm. And so, and I know we don't have a lot of time, and you've, there's a whole study around it.
Mm-hmm.
But would you say that acceptance of yourself first is a good starting point?
It is. It's probably the finite starting point. There's not going to be a way to live an authentic life if you don't first assess who you are, what's important to you, where your pleasure lies, where your limits are, where your boundaries are. You can't share that with another person until you've discovered it and come to grips with it for yourself.
And something that I've seen happen as well is, especially later in life, where you've already engaged in a relationship and you've known something about yourself for a long time. And then because something like this is not something that you come to accept, unfortunately, right now. It's so then when you finally accept it, there's that little like, crap, I've just created this whole life, my life is a lie kind of thing. So what would be, if you could put it like in steps, I guess.
Sure.
What the process of that would be.
Yeah. So if somebody goes through their life and creates a life with a partner or with a social network, and realizes that they've been living inauthentically and they want to correct that or change that, probably the first thing they need to do is accept who they are, embrace who they are, and if needed, get assistance with dealing with that, and then perhaps figure out who needs to be informed, to what extent, and in what order. Who do I tell first? What am I telling? So let's say it's a family and one partner discovers and comes to understand that they have a different orientation than they'd been presenting. So do you go up and tell your 15-year-old kid first, or do you tell your partner first? Well, you probably tell your partner first and then come up with a strategy to discuss it with your 15-year-old child. So figuring out who to tell what and when is a great first step after you've discovered for yourself.
Okay, I think that is really important, because I think that's something that's happening a lot right now, and it's part of what keeps us in that shame trap. Because not only are we ashamed of how we are feeling on a sexual level or our desires, so coming to grips with that, but now it's also like, I've created this inauthentic life, so I'm stuck. Where do I go? And that's where I've also seen a lot of people get stuck. Where they're like, okay, so then they become very depressed. It could lead to depression, suicide, just...
Absolutely. Or hurting the people that you love and unintentionally. So going out and sort of honoring yourself and living a more authentic life, but doing that in a betraying kind of way to your partner, to your family, to your closest people. That isn't going to help, and that's going to lead to all kinds of new shame. So it's not the greatest way to do it. I think taking into account that what you've been, let's say the primary person has been grappling with for months or years, let's say, when you first share that with your partner or your family or your friends, realize that's day one for them. So creating that space and creating that understanding and leaving room for them to have their own reaction. There might be a feeling of grief and loss. There might be a sense of betrayal. You've known this for how many years, and you're just now telling me. So they're going to feel betrayed. They're going to say, how can I ever trust you again? So there's going to be this reconciliation of grieving and a sense of loss, and then rebuilding, hopefully, and then a sense of regaining trust.
And so, I mean, understandably, it's a process, and I think for both parties, especially in this situation, when you're coming out and when you're coming to terms with it, being understanding on both sides, understanding that this is new, understanding that this is a big step, and not taking it personal, I think, is a big step. But I am going to have to wrap this one up. The good thing is that we do have another segment where we can continue our conversation and get a little bit deeper in this. So stay tuned. Keep watching.